Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in, but before we begin today, I'd just like to say that this review has been very kindly sponsored by Opinion Outpost. And I highly recommend you check out the site in the description, because all you need to do is sign up and then answer surveys for research companies in exchange for gift cards and PayPal cash. It's a sweet little system, it's totally legit, and it will help you get Breath of the Wild on the Nintendo Switch if you live in the UK, because how much more expensive could you make it? So thanks again, Opinion Outpost, for supporting the show, and please go into the link in the description and have a look at the site. It's win-win, it's very easy, and you get your voice heard by companies. Some of them are even asking you questions about movies and video games, and you get your wallet filled at the same time. It's good for everybody. Anyway, thanks for listening, and on with the show. It is the middle of May in the UK, and I have to wear a hoodie and a hat. Yes, it's miserable. Why am I still living here? Anyway, have you ever had that moment in any game where you fall in love with it straight away, but then the more you play it, the more problems arise, just one after the other? It's so frustrating.
And that is exactly what I experienced with the recently released Little Nightmares on PS4. This indie title has tiny little masterpiece written all over it, and for the first hour I felt like it was heading that way, but then the problems slowly came out one after the other. So I think it's fair to say in this case that this is an extremely flawed miniature masterpiece.
Little Nightmares could have been something a lot more than it already is, but I have a feeling that a spiritual successor or a sequel would fix a lot of the issues I have with it as it stands. Does that make it a bad game though? No, not at all, just not as good as I think it could be.
Developed by Tarsier Studios, Little Nightmares is easily described as like Limbo or Inside by Playdead, but with more dimensions to the gameplay as you can move all around a surface instead of just left and right, and with way more imaginatively gruesome in-your-face presentation that's a lot less subtle than something like Inside. The story is open-ended and nothing is explained, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but here there was one thing that was left a bit too gaping and open, which I'll talk about later, but for the most part does its subtle storytelling very well. The game begins strongly with an initial unclear indication if you are in the real world or a nightmare world itself, but then slowly starts becoming clearer the more ghastly horrors you uncover. This is actually what's happening, and it's more than gruesome. It's all those very tall kitchen utilities straight out of Wonderland. You think you're in a dream? Nah, you aren't dreaming that you're in an extra big world. They actually belong to that hideous thing. The stuff that you find inside this game are fascinating, absolutely vile, and often demonic, but I personally couldn't see anything else to further discuss or have any interest in digging into. I figured this was a story about children that are rounded up onto some kind of cruise ship to be grounded into meat and eaten by the lovely general populace paying to come and stay there. But that's literally all I can say about it. You gotta try escaping out of it at the end. There are lots of details and themes to construct theories with, but since what is actually happening is so simple in concept enough that you don't feel like you truly have an impact in the story or the world until the very end, the story is just kind of there, and your actual character engagement and role in it is rather insignificant until, like I said, the very ending. But that's the thing that I have the biggest problem with. You aren't disrupting the flow of Limbo and forcing everything else in the world to try and survive another day as you search for your family, and you aren't escaping a sinister corporation and meddling with their plans so much that they feel the need to kill you on sight. You're just a little girl that needs to escape people trying to eat her, all the while trying to keep herself from dying of malnutrition by eating anything and everything that moves out of desperation. The end. And I find it a bit of a shame I didn't have much interest in going deeper with it. Does that make it bad though? Not in my opinion at all. It's just more style than it is substance to me. And it really does just end. This is the thing that bugs me the most. For such a simple story told so subtly, the ending gives you nowhere near enough information or visual cues to even start speculating what the hell happens, and even if I did, you eat more awful things in every chapter, then eventually eat the presumed head of the whole operation of the child-eating cruise ship going on, leading you to walk around and kill the fat people with black magic or soul stealing or whatever that is, and there was just, there's just no meat to this. It happens completely out of nowhere with no indication of fantasy elements or anything like this even being present until this point, so why is any of this happening and why should I even care?
Yep, I couldn't tell you what the metaphorical meaning of that ending portion of the game is all about, and honestly, I think what's worse is that if someone explained it to me, I honestly wouldn't care. I just found it way too sudden, out of nowhere, and stupid, when in relevance to the disturbing, if a little bit flat, underlying story. However, when the game does focus on nothing but just delivering shocks, suspense, and style, then yes, it's gorgeous in the most abhorrent way possible.
This is one of the coolest damn art styles I've seen in a horror-esque game for a long time, and despite my comparisons to Playdead games so far, it definitely has a totally original look to it. You know those really old and timey English advertisement art styles and signs for butchers in the 19th and early 20th century? The art style that tries to be cute but ends up just being uncanny, alien, and way too dark and grim? That's basically what Little Nightmares is. It's an old, dated, terrifying butcher's advert incarnate, and it looks so so good. It's like if Tim Burton didn't give a shit about making a film PG. It's nasty, dirty, violent, and extremely dark, figuratively and literally. Character designs are yet again uncanny and unsettling, and the sound design makes everything all the worse, along with the stunning music. And when I say stunning, I mean it can make you freeze and stun you. It's really messed up, and it makes everything scarier when you wouldn't think it would be. When this stuff is combined with the gameplay, in 80% of the playtime, it can create extremely raw, intensely horrifying situations. I mean, it's not a drop-dead unplayable, terrifying game, or even arguably a horror game in the first place, but I was more scared here than a lot of pure horror games over the last few years from the level of uncertainty in the narrative, off characters, and just awful interiors of this lovely ship. The main theme running through this entire game is greed. Greed, gluttony, and gross, disgusting nightmare fuel, and that coupled with the fact that everything in the game wants to eat you and nothing else makes Little Nightmares enough of a vague and sickening rollercoaster to keep the gameplay fresh and frightening, and the characters around you always feel empowering and threatening. It's also very Limbo or Outside-like through its puzzles. The controls the game gives you to work with allow for the basic kind of stuff as you walk, run, jump, crouch, grab, and use a light source on occasion, because like I said, this game is dark. And unfortunately, the light doesn't come into use for any puzzle or situation really at all. It's very disappointing, apart from helping you see in the dark and alerting the enemies around you if you use it carelessly. Now, instead you're looking at timing puzzles, physics puzzles, puzzles involving grabbing one thing in a room and moving it to another, distracting, and platforming and climbing around the environment, figuring out how the world around you works. There's nothing really unique about the puzzles or anything surprising, but they aren't bad at all, and the added dimension to movement can make them very interesting. Most places and things around you are interactable, which makes approaches often more open and interesting in chases along with puzzles, and being able to use the camera to really gaze off into the distance is pretty awesome and helpful, as are the controls that make you feel extremely heavy and insignificant but not totally useless. It feels eerily like Limbo, for yet another comparison. And as far as the dimension stuff goes, there's an eye puzzle early on in the game that's made a complete joke out of by going into the background behind the blind spot, and I really liked that. It tests how you look at the game structuring and sees if you're able to look beyond the environment and not just the obvious immediate stuff in bright lights right in front of you, which is an idea brought back later on all the time with multiple hiding places for different situations when you're being hunted. And being hunted isn't only a sudden and sharp gameplay shift, but when combined with trying to find keys for doors and smashing objects to distract enemies and grabbing the key to make it out of where you came from alive, makes it very gripping, especially when you choose the best times to use your light to even see what's going on and not alert anyone of your presence. Some chases give you the chance to view what's ahead in a safe space to plan your approach, and there's plenty of indication on how to deal with some threats that may look trial and error but actually aren't. There are 2 cracks in the walls for long arms here, and some heavy breathing indicates that something might happen if you get too close. And with my favourite example of this, at the final boss as it were, you first see her at a broken mirror in her room, and then notice that every other mirror around you is broken in every other room that you're in. So when you then pick up a real mirror, the first thing you should do is stay in the light and reflect onto herself to see what happens, because why else would she not look at normal mirrors? And for an indie game, I was impressed with the level of choreography in those chases. They were like Uncharted levels of satisfying for reading the environment and reacting appropriately, and obviously on a much smaller scale, but nevertheless more panic-inducing and creative. Look at this messed up madness. A small team made this. It's pretty impressive stuff.
Whenever it's not entirely obvious where you do need to go and then you stumble off of the beaten path and then find a hidden collectible, yes, that feeling does feel great. It feels optional, it feels creative, it feels like you're doing something. But then that quickly starts to become false.
As far as I understand, the secret statues you can break, the gnome creatures to collect, and the candles and lanterns to light don't actually contribute to anything. No hidden endings, secrets, or anything, apart from concept art which you can accidentally stumble into online when just looking for images of the game if you want to see screenshots to see what the game is like. And they are very well hidden and are satisfying to grab, but why make them so hard to find and give you the impression you've missed something with level designs if you're not going to reward the curiosity? I'm not saying that every single thing in a game needs a reward, but with the deliberate vagueness, ambiguity, and open explorative opportunities to apparent nothingness, the game is basically asking for a true ending or something like that definitely does reward the curious players, but no, there's nothing here. It's even worse when I found my first gnome in a room with loads of places to climb and an apparent secondary puzzle where I could grab the gnome and throw it around, but after multiple attempts to do something with it, nothing would happen at all. What's the point of giving me all this choice to grab and throw these guys in a room like this for no reason? It's just a waste of time. And God forbid, if there actually is a trick or secret within this room, then it's so ridiculous cryptic that I might have to punch myself in the nips. And on the odd occasion, the rules can change, which makes puzzles and chases not that fair sometimes. Some lockers you can push, others you can't. Some doors can be pulled open and you can hide in something, some can't. Some items that in real life wouldn't be so heavy can't be dragged, but then way heavier items are completely okay to push around. And this can be a problem like in the long arms killing puzzle, where I tried the actual solution to the puzzle first thing, but then there was no indication that anything was even working. You just look like you're grabbing another item too heavy for for you to carry. So then I got killed and didn't try anything like that again, only to continuously die over and over again, jumping and grabbing all over the place until, oh yes, I actually could do the thing that I tried first of all. More clear visual feedback would have been appreciated. Not being able to shimmy is also a little bit of a problem, which can lead to an unfair death or two, because you could easily clamber up something, but the game just doesn't let you. To be fair, it usually is the easiest and most telegraphed object or obstacle on the screen, which is the solution to keep the pace up of the game. And if someone crashes and blasts their way through something to get to you, forget any interactable items, just run for it. That usually ends up working for you until you can slide like a pro under a hiding place further on. And in those instances, it didn't feel like trial and error, since I think it does a good job showing you how your moves can differently affect the environment around you in enough safe places for you to make quick decisions logically and make you feel good for working around the quirky rooms that you actually feel like you're scampering around and not obviously highlighted climbing paths. The same can be said for the noisy things on the floor and other obstacles. They aren't necessarily obvious, but perfectly blended into the environment, do make sense to be there, and require concentration to avoid at all times.
So yes, in conclusion, Little Nightmares was indeed full of little nightmares. Loads of tiny little problems that came together to make one big problem that wakes you up in the middle of the night. There are definitely moments of this game where you feel like you're playing the next big indie classic, but then a lot more of it is just stuff that you may have already seen before with a little bit more meh thrown in. Overall though, I thought it was priced really great, I thought it controlled and played itself really well, I thought it looked phenomenal, and it lasted just the right amount of time. So there is a lot to love with this game, absolutely. But I give Little Nightmares a 7 out of 10. If it's your birthday today or watching this video, happy freaking birthday to you, and please remember to stay beautiful.